Eagle River Watershed Council is the only nonprofit organization, or really the only entity, that is exclusively focused on keeping the rivers and streams of Eagle County healthy. Since 2004, we have been a donor-supported organization that monitors, restores, protects, and advocates for the Eagle and Upper Colorado rivers and their tributaries. Eagle County has 55 miles of the Upper Colorado River flowing within our borders, from about Radium to the start of Glenwood Canyon. In regards to the Grizzly Creek Fire, the primary stream impacts do fall within Garfield County. However, impacts from the fire and firefighting will be felt directly within Eagle County and on our streams. And more importantly, watersheds and rivers have no awareness of political boundaries or organizational jurisdictions. We view our rivers and watersheds as interconnected systems and want to see healthy rivers throughout. Eagle River Watershed Council is already working with our direct downstream partners, like Middle Colorado Watershed Council, as well as others, to make sure the impacts and potential impacts are addressed quickly. We created these films as we have questions about what lies ahead, both in impacts and in how we can take action. We thought that you might too, so join us as we get answers to these questions. Kathy, thank you very much for joining me today. Everyone joining us with me today is Kathy Chandler-Henry. She is an Eagle County Board of County Commissioner and has been since 2013. She also serves as a representative for Eagle County on the Colorado River District Board and has done so since 2017. She is the county's representative on the Water Quality and Quantity Committee, also known as QQ, and serves on the Rudai Reservoir Water and Power Authority. And our favorite fact is that Kathy was a former president of the Eagle River Watershed Council. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kathy.
Thanks, Holly. That was a high point for me as well, was that time on the board with the Watershed Council.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right into some questions here for you about the Grizzly Creek Fire that we're assuming that quite a few people in the community are wanting to have answers to. So our first question is, as an Eagle County Commissioner and a member of the Colorado River District Board, have you experienced a fire like this before? And if so, what insights do you have to share from that experience and leadership during that time?
Thanks. You know, the incident management team that is here calls this a complex fire. They sent in a type 1 incident management team, and the reason for that, besides just the harrowing nature of the fire itself, is all the complexities. It goes through a major interstate corridor. There's a major transportation rail line, cargo and passenger, power line corridor, the Shoshone Power Plant, which of course is critical for water on the whole western slope and the whole Colorado River Basin to California and Mexico. There are recreation values, there's wildlife, there are towns at either end of the canyon. So there are a lot of things involved. So I would say the closest thing that we've experienced as a county is the Lake Christine fire, which was in 2018, and that threatened Algebel in the Roaring Fork Valley. It had some large impacts on water resources there. This fire is bigger than all of those. The Lake Christine was about 11,000 acres. This fire so far is about 30,000 acres. So it's a big fire, bigger than we've experienced before. I think some of the lessons are the same. You ask about sort of what did we learn in the fires as far as communities and as far as leadership. And I think the huge thing we learned is that communities are very grateful for the help that comes in from around the nation to help with these fires, and they're very resilient. They are as traumatic as it is, they are willing to jump in, help their neighbors, help people get livestock evacuated, make sure people have a place to stay if they do have to be out of the way of the fire. So that community resiliency, that community gratitude is good. I think it's a huge reminder to all of us not to take our natural resources for granted. We're so lucky to live here, and I think we all know that every single day when we wake up. But when you wake up and there's a fire going on and it's smoky, and you see the beloved Glenwood Canyon burning up, you realize how critical that is, not just to our economy, but really to who we are. It's part of our quality of life. It's part of our souls. It's part of our own nature, that nature that we're trying to protect. So it's a grim reminder of what we have to lose by these events happening. So I think that was a big one. And then I guess the last one I'll mention is that it's a long haul for all those fire operations to be completed, and then the cleanup and the restoration work. So it's going to be going on for a long time.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And I would agree that this is a fantastic reminder of how lucky we are to live here and how important these natural resources are. So thank you for mentioning that piece.
Right.
And for you, what are your biggest concerns with the Grizzly Creek Fire and its possible effects relating to our water resources in particular?
Well, it's I think to be seen. Some of the short-term critical water resources are what the town of Glenwood is dealing with, because their water supplies were directly threatened with No Name and Grizzly Creek diversion points for their town's water. So I think they had some redundancies and they were able to keep water supplies. So that's been a big immediate impact. The longer term impact, one of the concerns I've had is what happens if the Shoshone Power Plant is damaged or destroyed. And as folks know, that's owned by Xcel Energy, but Shoshone has senior water rights, pre-compact water rights, so they are able to call water, meaning that when the water is low in the Colorado River, the Shoshone Power Plant can call in some of those junior water rights holders and diverters and keep the water in the Glenwood Canyon. That means our guides and outfitters can have raft trips, that our residents can recreate, and that there's a pretty constant supply of water in that river. So it looks like the Shoshone Power Plant is going to be all right. There is a Shoshone outage protocol that's been in place already, which kicked into gear with the Grizzly Creek Fire, and that keeps the water in the river even when the power plant is not calling for it. But that's another one of those resources that we know is a bit tenuous on the western slope, and it's critical to us. So I think all the efforts to make sure the western slope keeps the access to the water resources provided by Shoshone, that's sort of top of mind again. And then just the long term, the sediment, the rockfall, all that vegetation that has grown up over hundreds and thousands of years in the Glenwood Canyon is burned in some sections, and that means the pieces that hold the rocks in place are not there. We all know in the springtime here it can be treacherous driving through the Glenwood Canyon because the soils get wet when the snow melts and it starts to thaw and the rocks can fall. Now there's nothing to hold that in, so that's going to be a huge task for CDOT, for the Forest Services to try and mitigate those rock falls. It's going to be a danger not only for travelers in the canyon, but for that Colorado River. And I think that it's something like 40 million people rely on the Colorado River for water downstream of us. So any impacts here, our snowfall in the winter affects all those 40 million people, and that rockfall and that sediment in the river is going to affect those 40 million people as well.
And now there are many values that are being impacted by the Grizzly Creek Fire. Some examples of those include the economic losses, the loss of habitat, the transportation challenges, the water quality and quantity issues downstream, et cetera. And you touched on this already, but what do you see as the value that takes priority in the short term? And then as a leader, how do you try to balance those in the longer term?
I think this is sort of an obvious one, but it has to be top of mind, and that's firefighter safety and resident safety. COVID's made it challenging for the firefighters. They can't gather in big camps, so they're all in what they call spike camps, trying to stay closer to the fire. But that's the number one value is human life. Beyond that, I think is the habitat, the natural resources, the wildlife. You know, we did get a chance to drive through the canyon a couple of days ago. There, I think my imagination is worse than the reality, although it's terribly burned in many places. There are pockets where it's still green and where there's vegetation. So the hope is that the wildlife was able to get to water sources and was able to stay safe, but trying to recreate that habitat for them is going to be a challenge. And then I think just what we have all been working on in Eagle County for a while and other places too is the devastating effects of climate change. It is so hot and so dry that you almost look crosswise at the forest and it bursts into flames. So the dry lightning storms that we have without rain. But that's, I think, the longer term for all of us to look at is what can we do to mitigate some of those things that are pushing that climate change and the lack of precipitation, the higher heat, the lack of snow cover. All of those things are going to be a huge impact for us in the future, and all of those things lead to lower water in the river. So that's everything from recreation, because we rely on the recreation for our economy. So recreation, economy, for drinking water, for health, for just human life, that's of course a huge issue. So it, I think, just brought all of that to the forefront and made it so you can't just sort of assume life is as normal, because it's not.
Yeah, and I mean, that kind of hints at some calls to action for local residents and beyond. What are some of those things that everyday folks that live here in Eagle County and beyond could be doing?
Right. I think being really mindful of our water resources. We know by now that the biggest use of water resources is outdoor watering. So whatever you can do to reduce your landscape watering makes a big difference. That water that goes on your lawns comes out of the river. So that's something we can do. I think COVID has taught us that we don't need to travel as much. You and I are talking virtually, and we're not traveling someplace. We had a meeting this morning with the mayors from all of the towns. Everyone stayed where they were. So reducing those greenhouse gas emissions that keep the heat out of the atmosphere, I think that's something that we can all do. And then just being really mindful of the resources that we rely on for our economy, for our livelihood here. But I think we can make a difference as communities, and now we sort of know how to do it a little bit because of COVID. So I'm hoping that we can keep those good habits in place.
Yeah, those are really good points, and I think things that everyone can engage on and understand, and thank you for that.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the resources that are available to the community as a whole in restoring this burn area? I've heard people mentioning BEAR, which is the Burned Area Emergency Response, and then
Right.
other references, lots of acronyms floating around out there. So can you kind of get us up to speed on what some of the opportunities are for support?
Yes, and I think we will be learning more as things go on, but the state has a lot of resources through Department of Local Affairs and through their Homeland Security and Emergency Management services that they will be helping us as we move forward. Of course, the Forest Service has big teams, and most of this fire is on Forest Service lands. The BEAR team that you mentioned is here in town, and they will be looking at what do we need to do to stabilize soil. Some of the soils are burned so badly they don't regenerate quickly. But if you have a chance to, next time you're in the Roaring Fork area, look at the Salt Mountain and look at the areas that burned in Lake Christine just 2 years ago. Those have been reseeded and they are coming back green. In some cases, the habitat may be improved because the dead down timber is no longer, so there may be some improvements in wildlife habitat. I think there will be grants available out there, and I'm sure that the Watershed Council and the county will be posting those as soon as we find out what those are for people to do habitat restoration. One of the things that the county's been involved in for a long time, and again should be top of mind for people now, is fire mitigation around your home. If you've got cabins in the woods, even if your home in a town, you should have the brush pulled away from the sides of your home. You should have fire mitigation done. And we have people here at the county who will come out to any homeowners group and help figure out how to make your home a more fire resistant area. And that helps all of us. You can see when these fires hit, if they come to areas that have been treated with prescribed burns or fire mitigation work, that usually really helps slow down the fire. So those are some things that we can all do as we're moving forward to try and make sure we're fire resistant going into the future.
Those were all great tips, and it's really nice to know that we have resources out there and people that have been through this many times before to help us out, and case studies from all over the place that we can look at. So.
Right. Yes. BLM, Parks and Wildlife, Forest Service, they really have a lot of expertise out there, and they will be here to help us move forward.
Great. That gives us all a little bit of peace of mind.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Kathy. And everyone else, please stay tuned. We'll have additional films in the future.
Great. Thanks, Holly, and thanks to the Watershed Council for all your work.